Welcome to Virginia Sentencing Guidelines, What's New for 2021. In this video, I will provide a brief overview to changes to Virginia's sentencing guidelines that go into effect for anyone sentenced July 1st, 2021 or after. I'll go over legislative changes for crimes committed July 1st, 2021 or after and their impact on the guidelines. We'll talk about revisions to sentencing guidelines to include the addition of the case details worksheet. I'll review substantial assistance, acceptance of responsibility, or expression of remorse, along with acceptance of the nonviolent risk assessment. We'll talk about revisions to the sexual assault worksheets, and I'll introduce the newly revised probation violation guidelines worksheets. So the first legislative change we're going to talk about are the legislative changes to robbery. The penalty structure has been modified for robberies committed July 1 or after. As a result, guidelines for robberies under 18.2-58 will be suspended. The General Assembly did not modify the carjacking statute. Effective July 1, all robberies, with the exception of carjacking, will become no recommendation offenses. Guidelines will still be completed for carjacking, and the case details worksheet must be completed for every robbery that occurred before and after July 1. I will introduce the case details worksheet later on in the presentation. A robbery that results in serious bodily injury or death will now be a Class 2 felony. It is important to note that the definition of serious bodily injury in the robbery statute is not the same as that used when scoring guidelines. A robbery in which a firearm was used or displayed in a threatening manner will be a Class 3 felony. A robbery in which there was no serious bodily injury or a weapon other than a firearm was brandished or used in a threatening manner will be a Class 5 felony. And robbery where there was use of threat or intimidation not involving a weapon will be a Class 6 felony. These changes also impact scoring robbery as part of the prior record. Remember, when scoring prior record, we use Virginia's current penalty structure. If you are not able to determine the elements of the prior robbery, you will have to err on behalf of the defendant and score the robbery at the lowest penalty. Prior record classification is also impacted. Robbery with serious injury or death is still a Category 1 offense. However, robberies with a weapon or without serious injury will be Category 2 offenses. Several laws that are being repealed effective July 1st will have an impact on sentencing guidelines. For a defendant who has a prior conviction of habitual offender, that conviction will no longer be scored on the defendant's prior record. Likewise, a defendant with a prior conviction of petty larceny third offense will now have that prior conviction scored as a Class 1 misdemeanor. With the abolition of the death penalty, capital murder will now be referred to as aggravated murder and carry a statutory maximum of life in prison. Since it now has a maximum penalty of life in prison, it has the potential to be scored as an additional offense on guidelines. Capital murder has never before been scored on guidelines, and the recommendation yielded will not reflect a historically based sentence. The good conduct credit under 53.1-202.3 has changes that go into effect July 1st of 2022. And with the legalization of marijuana, new laws under 4.1 have been created, some of which will go into effect beginning July 1st of 2021, and the remaining will go into effect July 1, 2024. As of July 1, simple possession of marijuana was no longer scored on the guidelines for prior record. However, as of July 1, 2021, simple possession of marijuana less than 1 ounce will be legalized. Additional legislation regarding the legalization of marijuana will be effective July 1, 2024. Now, one revision to the guidelines was the addition of a new worksheet called the Case Details Worksheet. The Case Details Worksheet provides judges with standardized and consistent information for defendants being sentenced across the state. It will capture details of the offenses that must be known to accurately score the various factors on the guidelines worksheet. And finally, a section has been added which has been designed to capture other factors that may be known at time of sentencing. And we've included boxes for the preparer to indicate where the information for this factor was obtained. So next we'll review substantial assistance, acceptance of responsibility or expression of remorse, and the acceptance of the nonviolent risk assessment. On the revised sentencing guidelines final disposition sheet, judges now have the option to modify the sentencing guidelines recommendation based on any substantial assistance, the acceptance of responsibility, or an expression of remorse provided by the defendant to the court. This factor is exclusively for judicial use and would potentially modify the low end of the guidelines recommendation to no incarceration or reduce the low end by 50%. On the revised sentencing guidelines final disposition sheet, judges also now have the option to accept the nonviolent risk assessment as the sentencing guidelines recommendation. By checking the box, judges are not required to provide a departure reason. Next, we'll review revisions to the Other Sexual Assault and Other Sexual Assault Obscenities Guideline Score. On the Other Sexual Assault Worksheet Section A, under the Primary Offense Factor score, points have increased for 1 count indecent liberties with a child under the age of 15, and for 1, 2, or 3 counts of indecent liberties with child by a custodian. On Other Sexual Assault Section B, under the Primary Offense Factor, carnal knowledge has been moved to the same location as aggravated sexual battery. A new factor, the type of additional offense factor, has also been added. Under the type of additional offense factor, if the primary offense is indecent liberties, aggravated sexual battery, or carnal knowledge, and there is an additional offense at sentencing with a BCC prefix of SEX, RAP, or OBS, the defendant will now pick up 1 additional point. On the Other Sexual Assault Section C worksheet, scores have increased for the primary offense factor when the primary offense is 1 count of indecent liberties. For a defendant whose prior record is classified as Category 1, they will pick up 36 points for 1 count of indecent liberties with a child. If their prior record is classified as Category 2, they will pick up 18 points for 1 count. And if their prior record is classified as Other, they will pick up 9 points when their primary offense is 1 count of indecent liberties with a child. On Other Sexual Assault Obscenities Section A, the score has increased when the primary offense is 1 count of online solicitation of a child under the age of 15. Another major change coming July 1st are the newly revised probation violation guidelines worksheets. Selected statutes relating to suspended sentences, good behavior, and probation violations have been modified to limit the amount of time a defendant can be placed on good behavior or supervised probation. Legislative changes also limit the amount of time the court can impose for first and second technical violations. This limitation does not apply to third or subsequent technical violations, second violations of conditions 9 or 11, violation of special conditions such as sex offender or gang conditions, or any other special condition ordered by the court such as restitution. These limitations also do not apply for new law violations. In 2020, the Sentencing Commission completed a multi-year study to revise the probation violation guidelines to more closely reflect judicial sentencing practices. As a result, probation violation guidelines have been expanded to cover new law violations. Probation violation guidelines have also been revised to incorporate legislative requirements into historically based sentencing practices. The Revised Sentencing Revocation Report, or SRR, has been revised to provide standardized information about defendants to judges across the state. The SRR has been revised to identify the number of technical violations in the defendant's history relating to the underlying offenses, as well as the type of violation, technical, special condition, new law, or any combination of these. A section has been added to identify all alternatives the defendant has utilized during their entire supervision history. This was added to provide consistent information to judges across the state to help identify what has been tried and what alternatives may be available for the defendant. Finally, fields have been added to provide the court with information relating to the defendant's confinement since being arrested for the violation. This information is for judicial review only. On the revised sentencing revocation report final disposition sheet, if the judge determines that the defendant is a good candidate for rehabilitation, they simply check the box indicating such, and the low end of the guidelines will be set to time served or 0. In instances where the judge needs to impose more time than the statute mandates so the defendant can complete a court-ordered program, or for restitution review, then the judge would check the treatment exception box. No departure reason would be required. There are 4 revised probation violation guidelines worksheets that go into effect July 1st, and the type of revocation will determine the worksheet completed and submitted to the court. The Sentencing Commission will begin circulating a newsletter twice a year entitled The Guidelines Messenger. This publication will serve as an information platform to aid guidelines users with remaining current about any changes that will impact the sentencing guidelines. If you are interested in subscribing, email sg@vacourts.gov. Remember that the Sentencing Worksheet Interactive File Transfer, also known as SWIFT, is the official way to prepare guidelines. To obtain your free and private account, just send an email to swift@vacourts.gov. Be sure to include your name, email address, bar number if you are an attorney, and the name of your primary court. You can visit the Commission's mobile site by texting VCSC to 56512. Here you can learn about the 2021 changes, register for seminars, or search for Virginia crime codes by statute or keyword. If you ever have questions or need assistance completing guidelines, you can contact staff of the Commission by phone, text, or email. Manuals, VCC books, and updates will be shipped in late June. An order form for the 24th edition of Virginia Sentencing Guidelines manual is available on the Commission's website. Judges, Commonwealth's attorneys, public defenders, and probation officers will automatically be shipped updates based on the number requested last year. Registration forms for our 2021 seminars are also available on the Commission's website, or you can register using the mobile site. We currently have What's New seminars scheduled for various locations across the state throughout the months of May and June. This concludes our What's New presentation. If we can ever be of assistance to you, please feel free to contact us at the Commission at 804-225-4398.